Excellent, and welcome to the TAD Summit Innovator Interview. So I'm really lucky today to be talking with Erlend Prestgard, who's the CEO and co-founder at Working Group 2. Erlend, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. Look forward to this.
No problem at all. So we're going to just get straight down to the questions. We know Werner very well. He's been part of TAD's community since the beginning. So what made you join Werner and found Working Group 2?
Yeah, I think, well, Werner is a pretty fun guy to work with, of course. So that's a good reason.
Yep.
I think it was, we met at a conference in Telenor, actually. So I was in Asia, I was in Bangladesh, working with the coolest operator in the Telenor portfolio. I did quite a lot of partner work with the likes of Facebook and Google. And I was increasingly frustrated seeing the speed, the iteration speed, the general speed, the general capability of what they were able to bring to the table compared to us frustrated me. And it frustrated me that when they did something at global scale, and we always did it at local scale. Yeah. And this nagged me increasingly, and it felt like we were on this very, very slow decline as an industry to where it's not going to be the over-the-top, whatever you want to call it, massive disruption. It's being eaten bit by bit from below, I would say, by these players that are just doing a better job at technology development than us. And it just fundamentally frustrated me. I met Werner at a conference. He started talking about software telco, and I think we just clicked on that, if we're going to change the industry, you have to softwareize it, you have to make it programmable, you have to make it flexible, you have to make it possible to iterate, and you have to attract an ecosystem. And that one thing led to another, and then we spun off from Telenor, became an independent company, and here we are.
Excellent, excellent. And that's a great origin story. So on to the next one. So what is Working Group 2's core offer to telcos, and how do you architect it?
Yeah, so I think I would say we kind of have two offerings.
Yep.
At a very high level, we offer your core network cheaper, faster, better. So it's a simpler core network that is this architecture for simplicity. I'll come back to that, but it's a simpler, better core network for your basic functionality. Yeah. The second part of the value proposition is a radically more innovative core network. So we used to call this Android for networks at some point. And what we meant by that was that we use the core network as a software layer through which we can API the entire network and make it available for a regular developer and facilitate a marketplace and an ecosystem of innovation.
Gotcha.
So it's a simpler, faster, better, more affordable core network, and it's a radically more innovative platform for innovation on top of the core network.
Gotcha. Understood.
That's the product.
Yep.
I think in terms of architecting it, I think there are a couple of key decisions. We are, we're not Nokia or Ericsson. We're not thousands of people. So we had to be focused. So we have chosen to leverage, cloud providers and their capability to focus. That's one big architecture decision. The other one is we terminate telco at the edge. So as far as humanly possible, we try to create I call it a box or an edge. And we let, for example, Sigtran or Diameter sit at the edge. Okay. And then we use developer-friendly, high-performing, modern protocols inside our stack, such as gRPC, for example. And I think that's a huge decision to enable developer efficiency and effectiveness and happiness. Quite a few of our developers do want to hurt themselves badly if they get too entrenched in Sigtran.
Yes. Well, the
so
documentation is just scary, let's face it. It's distributed across years of tomes of telco standards with a whole host of weird variations that are in appendices. You have to read, most probably months worth before you could even start doing anything. While with gRPC, it's just there within, it's like a page and you can get going. It's built for developers and it's a very different approach. So yeah, good points.
I think we have a bit of fun with this. We have we have the necessary amount of people that understand SIGTRAN as well.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, they're gold because they can actually answer that one SIGTRAN question that requires 10 years of reading before you know it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't scale to have thousands of those people. You need to have regular developer velocity.
Yeah.
And then I think the next one is we have radically simplified, right? So I think Werner has a favorite chart where he shows, IMS stack kind of in the telco way, yes. And then our stack, and it's just so radically simplified. Lots of functions are collapsed. So we function as a core network to the outside world like any other core network, yep. But on the inside it's radically simplified.
Yep.
And then I think the last one, this always makes operators nervous, but they don't really have any reason to. Is we build for what's in use.
Yes.
So we don't take the 3GPP standard document and say we're going to build all of this. And we talked to operators who've done statistical surveys on this, right? Operators often use 10% of what they ask for in their own RFPs.
Correct.
We build the 10% and then we add the 10 things that are lacking, and we can add those relatively easily, but we do not build the 90%.
Exactly.
And again, it radically changes our complexity, I would say. So I think it's a lot about simplicity, flexibility, and being cloud native as well. As you know, we sit on top of Amazon in general.
Yeah.
It's all containerized, Kubernetes is now, I think we're coming back to that.
Later on, yeah.
But built for simplicity, developer friendliness, cloud friendliness, and velocity.
Exactly. That iteration piece you brought right at the start. So then one thing you mentioned is the marketplace. So how does the Working Group 2 business model work for third-party developers?
Right. So I think in the marketplace, there are a few different roles. So, the operator buys a core network from us. That's the starting point, and they pay us for that.
Yeah.
And then comes the developer and the end user, and the operator and us. So there's like 4 players in here.
Yep.
And the end user does what the end user does. They subscribe to a service, and I think we're enabling storefront like logic where in your My Pages app with your operator, a user can actually see the 20 products that are available from this operator coming from whoever. Yeah. And they can activate the service and they can provision the service. So that's their role. And the developer can then set a price for which they want what the revenue to the developer should be.
Yeah.
Then we're fine tuning with the developers whether they should set the price to the consumer or whether the operator should set the price to the consumer. That's still being discussed. Probably we'll have several options for that.
Exactly.
And then the operator charges the end user. So the operator will maintain the billing relationship to the end user, at least in this first iteration. And we think that's going to be the case in most cases. We invoice the operator and we funnel the money back to the developer.
Yeah, gotcha.
Does that make sense? And then so we take the operator, the developer sets the price for what they want. We take a cut of it, a reasonable and a low cut, I would say, to make sure that we invest in this ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And we funnel the money so that the developer gets their money.
Understood. So in a way, it's a sort of limited, more focused app store, and you're not trying to be millions upon millions of apps, rather some focused ones that maybe telco isn't doing or could do, but it's just taking too long. So you can get stuff out into customers' hands so they can play with it. Now, is it with the telco branding? Is it with the developer branding? How does that work?
So I think there's going to be different types and sets of apps. Okay. So there's going to be a developer has made an app and they want it to be their branding, and that's absolutely fine. We want to allow for that. There is going to be more white label enterprise grade apps that where there's a bilateral agreement with the operator to have a branded version.
Yep.
So I think we are open to all opportunities. Gotcha. I would say. I think you're right. I don't think there's going to be millions of apps. But I do hope there are going to be thousands.
Yeah.
But it's going to start with being tens, and I think there's definitely going to be hundreds.
Yep.
There is this, the amount of small use cases that exist in this industry is ridiculous. And I think part of the reason why we're not seeing them coming through is that each business case is small and the cost of building is high.
Exactly.
So when we now structurally draw down the cost of building something, we do hope that these use cases, which is, mainly being restricted to a big PBX maybe, you can actually start getting 10 small PBXs for 10 different use cases.
Exactly.
At least that's the hope, and we do believe that's possible. And we've, when we have a hackathon day, the stuff that a small team can put out in a day is completely ridiculous based on these APIs. It is completely ridiculous. It is, compared to what you can do inside an operator, it is, it's 100x the productivity.
Exactly, because it's just standing on the shoulders of giants. You've made the API very easy. You make sure the documentation, enables the developer to just get to the piece that they want to implement, because a lot of times they're using a particular feature of the platform, and they may have something else going on in terms of their backend. I think we have existence proofs today around, especially like mobile PBX.
Yeah.
And the fact that there are third parties developing and using that. We'll have a interesting presentation from Uwe covering that. In fact, we've got a very interesting presentation from Play in Poland covering exactly this type of model. So the existence proof is there. And I think what you're highlighting is, this can be customized and optimized for different verticals, like for dentist offices. So you make it, it's got all the pieces that you need as a dental office to run, to ensure people actually turn up for appointments, and all the follow-ups and all the rest. That has, you can think of it like a mini CRM that you just go, oh, that's the dental package, and it's just built for what you need.
And I think there's a good reference point here. I think Twilio, I think, is an amazing reference point. So I think our objective is to make every operator as programmable as Twilio is, but for a broader and deeper set of capabilities, and down to individual IMSIs and subscribers.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's like an operator version of Twilio for every single subscriber. But I think Twilio is a good reference point in terms of trying to make it easy and available to developers. And I have to comment on this when we're talking about this is, Twilio basically, roughly speaking, and started selling SMS on behalf of operators, now have a market cap that is significantly above that of the Telenor group.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Which is a fascinating story.
But I was telling them that 20 years ago. But anyway, it's all water under the bridge. Breathe in, breathe out, relax. So you mentioned a trigger word, core network. Now, there's a very cozy relationship between telcos and their strategic vendors, and it has a very high barrier. How are you inserting yourself in that closed, cozy relationship?
Yeah, that's a good question. And of course, I think for any new player into this industry, this is the single biggest hurdle. Unless you have the names of one of the 3 or 4 big ones, and you haven't been there for 20 years, you don't have credibility.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of building blocks to it. I think first of all, we don't go to Verizon and suggest that we switch out their core network. We don't even try to do that.
Yeah.
So I think with the MNOs, we try to talk to them about doing the things that they're not able to do in their normal core network.
Gotcha.
So it's what we term adjacent core. So it's the core for IoT, it's the core for SMB, it's the core for private networks, it's the core that they just, with their normal core, where the projects that they want to do, they just don't reach the priority list in getting implemented in the normal core. We can run up on the side, and we can take care of all of those things that generate complexity in the normal core that we can handle in very different ways. So I think for MNOs, I think that's the strategy. We do the stuff that they're not able to do in the normal core because it's too expensive or too complex.
Exactly.
And then I think more in general, I think we target, shall we say, the the other use cases, all sorts of MVNX, we're perfectly suited for that.
Yeah.
I think private networks is an emerging focus area for us.
Yep.
IoT players, I think we can, offer quite unique levels of programmability. Subscale operators, I think, is super interesting for us because we deliver this as a service.
Yep.
So I don't know if in the US, there are actually 90 operators, I think, in the US now. Most people have heard of 4, but 86 of them. There are 86 more.
Yes.
I don't know how they survive. I don't know how they get anything to work. But taking out the cost and complexity of having your own core network with your 10 engineers for serving 100,000 users, perfect for us. We give them one tenancy, and we can have 86 different tenancies running one big network on behalf of all of them.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. You build credibility by starting somewhere, I think, is the short answer to your question.
Exactly. Now, so I'm just going through the barriers because I've banged my head against these barriers for quite some time. Another is telco culture. And that's, because let's face it, telcos have created innovation groups. They've then canceled those innovation groups, then restarted those innovation groups, all about helping work with developers and small companies and being innovative and agile and all the words that they sort of wish for. Yet telco culture keeps overriding. So I apologize for belabeling the same points sort of from different sort of perspectives, but just interested in, again, how are you reducing the impact of telco culture on your business?
I think the very short answer is that we try to make ourselves independent of it, in the sense that I think our job is to make the operator innovative without having to change their culture.
Exactly.
In a way, right? So by delivering the core network, which they need in any scenario, that's your under the radar. You can kind of slide in with a core network, which they need anyway. And hey, suddenly they might actually have 20 products that they didn't have before.
Yep.
And you've given them innovation whether they want it or not. So that's, I think, one part of the answer, that we try to avoid the problem. We don't sell only on innovation. We do. Half of the operators we talk to, they want simplicity and they're cost focused and they want it as a service. That's important for them. There's no innovation there, or there's innovation, but there's no product innovation. Half the operators are super focused on the product and service innovation on top of the platform. My point is we can talk to those that want the stuff on top, and we can talk to the ones that want the simplicity and give them the stuff on top anyway. So I think the key is we try to make ourselves independent of that cultural aspect. And you're absolutely right. Every 5 years, there's a pendulum that swings back and forth between, wanting to do innovation and then wanting to do cost cutting, and then wanting to do innovation and then wanting to do cost cutting.
Exactly.
I think it's extremely hurtful for the industry.
Yes.
I think also, as we discussed, I think this is a big economic problem for the industry. They are telco is fundamentally a huge capex optimization industry that they spend lots and lots of money up front to build the network, to buy spectrum. And then their job, and we have to respect this, their job is to optimize the ROI on that investment.
Yeah.
And that skill set has dragged the culture in a certain direction, which is really tuned to optimization of economics as opposed to building new technology. I think you're seeing a new generation now. I think you're seeing Rakuten, you're seeing Geo, you're seeing us, you're seeing quite a few others that are coming up with much more fundamental innovation, actually rebuilding networks.
Yes.
And I think on top of that, you will see next generation of innovation coming.
Exactly. I think it is a change. It's slow in coming, but it is getting there. I think it's and they're all taking slightly different approaches as well, but often coming from within or adjacent to a telco group, which I think is an important piece, because just being on the outside looking in, you just don't break in. We've seen that for 20, 30 years now. So looking beyond just the telcos, because you've mentioned this before, and I'm interested to get your views around how you can work with, for example, alternate access providers, MVNOs, also enterprise networks, because again, with the move to 5G, we're seeing, lots of hype around private networks again, because they're sort of realizing, well, it's sort of just another G for the telcos, but for private networks, it's quite interesting. There's a whole host of stuff you can do because of the bands that are available. So interested in the role that working group can play outside of telco.
Yeah, no, we're looking quite a lot at this. And I think for us, there are a couple of key observations. One is, even if you have even if you have a small network, and even if it's still a very complex thing to run and operate.
Yeah.
So we don't think most enterprises will not run their own networks. So we think the as a service model is going to make huge inroads into the private network space. And I think we are natively built in a SaaS delivery model. So we think that suits us extremely well.
Yeah.
So we're going to go after it for that reason. I think the second thing is there's lots and lots of different private networks use cases, right? It's the mine that is off the grid and unconnected. That's not our use case.
Yep.
There are use cases where you have shared private networks with different radio legs but a shared core. We're absolutely perfect for that. And then there is the more on-prem private network everything solution, which I think we are evolving towards as well.
Gotcha. Understood.
So in general, I think we're extremely well suited for it. We have economics that scale on this. I think that the biggest benefit for us is we deploy an MNO grade, SLA and feature richness core network, and you can actually get a small slice of it as a private network. It's not a subset of functionality. You actually get the full MNO core network just in your small radio space.
Exactly.
So we can even have, your MSI SDN, your phone calls, your SMSs. We can actually have them flowing into the private network if we want to.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. So
I remember, it must be at least 15 years ago, where we were discussing private IMS for business. And I was just laughing because I was looking at the price points and the requirements that would blow out every enterprise data center I knew about, except for basically the big web providers and the big banks. But I think, 15 years later, we're now at a point where, exactly as you say, the technology being cloud native, being able to give people just a slice for the number of transactions they need. And the volumes aren't that significant compared to, a lot of the processes that, enterprises are dealing with across all the applications that they've got running across either the cloud infrastructure, hybrid, or private networks. So that's good to understand how you position. So looking at your delivery model, are you delivering through channels, direct? If it's, is it integrators? Is it traditional suppliers? How are you, getting those sales?
That's a non-trivial thing. No. There are two big axes for us today. This might evolve, of course, but
exactly.
So it's our own sales, and we think it's important to have a part of own sales, and we have our own small sales force to target the customers that we really think fit as well.
Gotcha.
That said, I think we announced this summer that we're going on Cisco's global price list. So this means that in the very, very, very near future, a Cisco sales rep can actually order us off the Cisco price system, and you flow into the full sales cycles of Cisco.
Now, is that referral, or is that actually they actually are acting as a channel?
They're actually acting as a channel. So we typically integrate fairly deeply with Cisco in that sales process.
Understood.
That's a very, very deep set of corporations.
Well, though you're an investor, you need to basically do what your investor asks, and they need to differentiate their offer to telco. So it's one where I understand, because that is a significant investment. That's why I was asking, is this just referral or
No, it's a lot more. And I think it comes back to exactly what you said, which is, as a newcomer, how are you going to wedge into this industry? And there is no doubt that in a lot of these scenarios, unless you have someone fronting you, you're going to have to wait another 3 years. So I think we see that in that cooperation, we can sometimes leapfrog many years of credibility building simply because they're there. So,
Exactly. No, that's good. And always with a small company, you know, you never look an opportunity, basically down. It's how, you have direct sales where you've identified a segment or operators where you can say, look, we've got this adjacent core, or they've got a particular pain point in, again, because the industry chats, they've just, Broadsoft got bought by Cisco, the price points have changed, the poor little sort of like regional MVNO or maybe enterprise focused MVNO is going, I can't make money between what I've got to pay Cisco and what the customer's prepared to pay, because they can now buy from Ring Central or, sort of can build it themselves on open source. Where's my margin? So there's a whole host of opportunities there where you can insert with a, as you said, SMB focused core to be able to deliver a range of services that helps the smaller providers regain margin between the technology stroke service provider and the price the customer will pay.
I think this is the right audience for that. But I think, for example, having SMB optimized PBXs is we're doing our first work on this now, but we would love to engage the community on this one. We think it's a big opportunity, easy to do.
Yes.
And we would provide a distribution platform for those companies that could be quite powerful.
Exactly. It's always, in part, the industry, well, the enterprise communications industry is very much dominated by North America. So they have UCAS, they have the big vendors that provide these solutions, and that's the only solution that exists in the world. And I find myself sort of raging against the machine a little bit, saying, well, Europe's done this very differently. You actually, the mobile carriers are a big vendor in the PBX space, because the mobile PBX, no, Avaya, Ring Central, and it's like, but a lot of small businesses are mobile only. They don't have desk phones. And this is the convenient way for a customer to call in and to get somebody in the business to answer. So, and again, we see very similar things in Asia, but in Asia, again, it's very siloed. It's a lot more fragmented. And I mean, you've worked there, so you understand, it's a very heterogeneous market. But again, because of the price points, because of, in some cases, the youth, so how young the country is in terms of people, there isn't all this legacy stuff around PBX and the rest. So therefore, the mobile operator has a very different role in providing a whole range of enterprise services that would once be considered, more, IBM or, one of the sort of traditional enterprise vendors. So I think, very much, both Europe and Asia, I think, and it'll be interesting to see, when we start seeing, sort of, more deployments being announced for Working Group 2, where is it? We're seeing geographically where it's popping up. But anyway, I'm rambling. I apologize. So let's just wrap up in, so what's your exit plan? You're a startup. You've got investors. They're looking for you to give them 10x. So how do you see your exit? Is it into like, an Amazon, Google, or more traditional Ericsson, Nokia, or is it actually some of the more, system integrators that are getting a lot more acquisitive and are building out, pretty sophisticated solutions for their enterprise customers with respect to communications, Capgemini, Accenture, etc., or is it IPO?
No, I think the first part of the good answer, I guess, is that I have the luxury of my owners asking me to build a business and not focus on the exit. So I think that is the first part. I think I honestly, I'm not tasked with having an exit plan at all.
Understood.
I'm tasked with building a solid business, and that takes all our focus.
Understood.
That said, I think there is an interesting industry discussion in general about what's happening. That is deeply fascinating, because I think everybody knows Microsoft buying Metaswitch and Affirmed. Google is active in this space, increasingly active in CBRS.
Yes.
I think Amazon so far maybe partnering, but I think everybody's waiting for something more to happen there.
Exactly.
So I think there is a I think and then you're seeing, some of the operators, and I would again point to especially Geo and Rakuten perhaps, really doing this or being, very courageous and saying, I can do a lot of this on my own.
Yes.
So there's a fundamental shift happening here away from fairly monolithic large companies into a much more fragmented space. And how that's going to turn out, I honestly don't know. I'm quite, every time I read a newsletter in the morning now, I have no idea what's going to pop up anymore. It's a bit fascinating. So I think it's an extremely fluid environment. I've never seen this amount of interesting news, technology speaking wise, in the industry. Exactly. I haven't seen that for a long time.
Exactly, and I think that's and it is relatively, when we look at how heterogeneous it is across all the different approaches. You mentioned Rakuten, Geo, yourselves, as well as the traditional cloud providers, because they are traditional now. Sort of Google, of course, it's always Google own built, because Google engineers are the best engineers in the world, and they will always build it themselves because they know how to do it better than anybody else. Microsoft, telco is a big piece of their business on a whole host of levels. I mean, let's face it, they bought Skype, which was, to me, perplexing. It's there as an asset. I mean, I still have Skype in my desktop tray. There's a few conversations. There's mainly family conversations now. There's very few work people on. There's lots of other platforms that people have migrated onto. And of course, buying up basically sort of Metaswitch and Firm Networks. I've commented about it in the my CX Tech newsletter. These are all steps it makes to be the default platform of choice when telcos are going, Kubernetes, we need cloud native, we've got to be everything on the cloud. Oh, but we can't employ people that have the skills, because they come in, they go, oh my God, your culture stinks, and run away. So we can see there's a shift happening, and the diversity we're seeing, I think, is what happens. It's almost like it's creating all the lubrication across all the different pieces of the industry to enable a flip to happen. Now, it's telco. When I say flip, it's not going to be next year. It's just like every core has disappeared, and it's either running on working group 2 or one of the big cloud providers, and then one of the big cloud providers buys you up to basically sort of acquire a piece. We're talking about decade here. So by 2030, I think it'll be a very different discussion we'll be having, where I think, because you bring up adjunct car, and that's something Werner has been talking about for many years, and it's obvious. It's exactly what, you have your big, here's the core services that nobody can touch, 5 nines, but then, that, and recognize it limits innovation. Having that adjunct enables you to do cool stuff that maybe doesn't need the same scale, can still achieve 5 nines in terms of availability, but doesn't have to work at hundreds, millions, in terms of sessions and all the rest. So, it's all these little pieces I think are interesting. How it falls out, let's face it, 20 years ago, I was founding a company in the telco API space, thinking, this is the future, and then seeing all these telco initiatives with BlueVia and the rest, and then it all ground to a halt. But with that said, then Twilio, Tropo, and a whole range of other companies, came in and filled the gap. And thanks to investors, understanding investors, they were able to have the stamina to wait till the market caught up.
I think, at the core of what we're talking about here is you have this industry that has, I'm going to be a little bit harsh, but has relegated itself to becoming a sourcing and marketing organization.
Yeah.
If I'm really harsh, you could say that. I don't think it's entirely true, but there is an element of truth to it.
80-20, yeah.
And I think in the coming, 10 or 20 years, the future doesn't belong, or I think the future belongs to the companies that are able to understand and leverage technology for their commercial needs.
Yeah.
I am worried that operators are going to be outrun, at every turn, since they haven't invested in that. Yes. And it kind of, I think this is an important industry, and it, while it can be made a lot better by technology giants, it also has a role in society that deserves to be local and deserves to be trusted and deserves to be.
Exactly.
There is inherent goodness in telco not being entirely global all the time. Right. I think there is. It's a useful counterbalance to our global giant ecosystem, where you actually have local operators.
Exactly.
Being local operators, the same level of programmability and innovation power as the giants, I think it's a fundamentally good cause to have.
No, absolutely. I think that's a very good point. It's having, I guess, truth and justice on your side, and meeting the local needs and protecting the customer's privacy. Because let's face it, the global giants survive. Evil organizations like Facebook survive by plundering, your privacy and then selling it to advertisers whose message will be delivered, or to, frankly, batshit crazy groups that are pumping out and indoctrinating people into the most crazy of ideas that I would never in my lifetime thought would be given any credibility.
At least I believe it's beneficial for society to have some heterogeneity in there.
Exactly.
It's never beneficial to have a few players dominate the globe. It's never a good idea. And I think, creating that. I think, one good example of this is, if you had programmable networks, mm-hmm. what would have happened to SMS from the operators?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure they would have come to WhatsApp themselves.
Yeah.
If there was, I'm pretty sure they would have come to that conclusion themselves. They would have integrated it, and it would have been, WhatsApp may still have existed, but I'm pretty sure they would have, some developer would have said, okay, I can kind of play with this, and I can, I'm seeing limitations, I can get somewhere, as it was implemented, it was, now it works, don't touch it.
Yeah.
And I think, I think they would have done that. And I don't know what the next SMS is, to be honest, but I'm pretty sure making it easy to do stuff with networks is going to increase the likelihood of whatever is the next SMS for operators coming out, mm-hmm. by just making things accessible and programmable.
Exactly. Because otherwise it's written in stone and it doesn't evolve. And it's back to the point you made right at the start about the internet giants being able to iterate. And it's just speed of iteration. It's not necessarily that they're right, but they can iterate and discover what works and what doesn't work, rather than SMS is the same as we've been using for 20 odd years. It's just, a few years after it got going, we finally were able to send up, SMS between operators. Remember those days when it was Telenor, you needed to make sure that the person you're sending that SMS to was another Telenor customer. And people used it. That's what amazed me. But cool. Erlend, this has been really fun. Really enjoyed this conversation. Really, I'm a big supporter of what you're doing. I see the challenges that you're facing from the traditional ecosystem, but also I think the thing that's I feel very positive about is all the other providers, the enterprise investments we're seeing around core, around the capabilities that you've been providing as a service. So I think lots of opportunity there, and it's interesting that you're taking a very pragmatic business model, which is, if we can sell it direct, it's direct because we're a as a service business, and we'll use channel where it makes sense for those particular customers. So pragmatism, hopefully will be your key to future success.
And then I think Marius, our head of product, would kill me if I don't say that, reach out to us, because now you actually can start building stuff on top of the platform. You can publish it, and we can help you market it to operators. So,
absolutely. Yep. And Marius will be giving a presentation at TAD Summit, so he'll be able to do far more advertising on what people can do with working group 2. Again, thank you so much, Erlend. This was great.
Thank you, Alan.